to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to this special episode of A Well-Designed Business. For today's interview, I had the honor of being invited by Theodore Alexander to meet and interview in person while I was in High Point, October 2018, Lord Spencer. And in case you just said, wait, isn't that? Yes, Charles 9th Earl Spencer is a British nobleman, peer, author, journalist, broadcaster, and he is the younger brother of Diana, Princess of Wales. Lord Spencer and I visited for about 25 minutes or so in the Theodore Alexander Showroom, and then we recorded this 10-minute interview about the Althorp Living History furniture collection, which he designed in partnership with Theodore Alexander. The pieces are all replications of furniture found in the 500-year-old Althorp Estate, where Lord Spencer and Diana grew up. Now, if you're not already familiar with Theodore Alexander is renowned for unmatched craftsmanship, exquisite finishes, and extraordinary design. Covering a diversity of periods and styles, you will find in their collections thousands of unique lighting, home accents, case goods, and upholstered furnishings. Theodore Alexander's licensed collections include, as mentioned, Althorp Living History, Kino Brothers for Theodore Alexander, Jamie Drake for Theodore Alexander, Michael Berman for Theodore Alexander, and Steve Young for Theodore Alexander, and are available throughout the world at fine furniture galleries and design centers. For more information, please visit www.theodorealexander.com. In the interview today, Lord Spencer tells us about the 500-year history of the Althorp Estate and how that history is captured in his furniture collection. He also talks about his memories of growing up in the castle and some of the favorite pieces in the collection. I found Lord Spencer to be both genuine and gracious, and his stories were fascinating. I understand for many of you, William and Harry are your princes, but for my generation, it will always be their mother, Princess Diana, and of course her brother, Lord Spencer. This was a true pinch-me moment, and I'm grateful for the invitation from Theodore Alexander, and I'm delighted to share my conversation with Lord Spencer about his extraordinary line of furniture with you. Now, let me introduce you to Lord Spencer. I'm joined here in Theodore Alexander by Lord Spencer, and I have to say, pinching myself just a little bit, and I'm very grateful that you invited me here to do this with Theodore Alexander and that you're taking your time. So welcome to my little baby podcast, Lord Spencer.
Well, I'm delighted to be part of it. Thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you. Okay, so we're here to talk about, first of all, tell me before we get into the furniture line and your relationship with Theodore Alexander, tell me a little bit about the heritage of the Spencer heritage and the 500 years dating back and the Althorp Castle and so forth.
So my family started off quite a long time ago as sheep farmers, and then we bought land and built Althorp. It's 510 years old. My children are the 19th generation of the Spencer family to be lucky enough to call it home. And we love it, and we've lived there for a long time. It's about 75 miles north of London. It's a very agricultural area. The house is surrounded by 550 acres of beautiful parkland. And then there's 13,000 acres around that of farmland. So, yeah, when you go through the gates of Althorp, you really do feel you've entered a different time era. And it's very lovely and very comforting, and also a wonderful responsibility.
That's a big part of it, the responsibility, right? You
Yes.
have a lot to live up to.
Well, I took over a long time ago as a 27-year-old when my father died, and I did feel very nervous, walking across any part of any of the house. You'd have all these paintings, the portraits of my ancestors looking down, and I was thinking, oh, I hope I don't let you down. I've got to do something with this place. And It's got 90 rooms, and there were some rooms I'd never really been into when I inherited, and it's trying to make it, you know, it's not a conventional home at all. It's like a historic headquarters of a family. And about 8 or 9 weekends a year, we fill it with family and friends and make sure that I obey the original will of the man who died in 1522, who built it, who said that Althorp must always be a place of entertainment. So I'm happy to obey that.
Isn't that special?
Yes.
You know, the rest of us read about these sorts of things and dream about it, but it's interesting to hear you describe your love for it and your connection through your ancestors all the way through, and the way you honor them and respect them. That's really very touching. I appreciate your sharing that with us.
Well, I'm also a historian. That's what I write history books, and you know, I've worked for the History Channel and things. But I'm very lucky to be somebody who adores history. And for me, history is about people. It's not about dusty, dry facts. It's about people. So to be surrounded by a living history lesson is quite nice.
Beautiful. And so now, how does that connect now to Theodore Alexander? What's happening with this connection, and what does that mean to you?
Well, about 17 years ago, I was approached by a couple of men who had read an article in an old, very high-end magazine in London that had said that Althorp has the finest private furniture collection in England. And they said, why don't you license it? It had never crossed my mind to do that. But I said, oh, I'll meet, if you want me to meet people to talk about it. And I met some people, and I really didn't feel a connection at all. And then I met the leading people at Theodore Alexander, and I realized they were very, very passionate about doing this. And they wanted to do something that would be a signature line for them. And I knew of their reputation as manufacturers anyway. And so we started a license, and then bizarrely, here we are. This is the 14th year of doing it. It's one of the oldest licenses in existence, I gather, and it's going from strength to strength. You know, one of the things I like is their passion for the heritage that comes from this, and what I can provide, which a lot of people are not in a lucky enough position to do, is I can give them the backstory of every single piece, because I had a grandfather who was really an academic rather than an aristocrat, and he spent his entire life going through the family records. We have all our family records going back 500 years. So he could identify every piece of furniture, who had made it, how much it had cost, why they'd bought it, if it had ever been repaired. So every single piece in this line, we now have 650 pieces in the Althorp Living History line, is an authentic piece that has a wonderful backstory.
It's interesting that you expressed the backstory, because isn't that the thing in everything we do, is to understand why it matters, to whether it's you or to someone that purchases it. It's that connection, instead of just a single piece of furniture that's beautiful under its own. But when you come to Theodore Alexander and you look at the collection that you have, you can learn all about what it was and then what it meant to you and your family and everything. That's very, very, very interesting. I love that.
Well, I think you're right. You know, basically anyone can make a nice looking piece of furniture that looks vaguely 200 years old. But what we can do here is really present something authentic. Maybe that upholstery is a little more comfortable because we expect that, but otherwise we're sticking to the original story. And I think for a client or somebody who's interested in this furniture, to have a connection through a story makes it so much more romantic and interesting and relevant. You know, I always feel when somebody buys a piece of Althorp furniture, they're buying an instant heirloom. It already has a back history, and then it enters the history of the family who buy it, and they add to it.
Right, and that, how much pride would that give somebody if they're to commingle your histories, your stories, right? It's an opportunity to connect and bring a piece of history to your own family, add something to it.
Well, I love history and true stories and real people from the past coming to life again, and I think these pieces of furniture do it. And it's something you can connect, something you can hang your hat on, really. You're not just buying something bland and generic, you're buying something that really is special. And also, I would say, you know, because this is a family collection, it's not a museum, over the generations, everyone who's taken possession of Althorp has had the chance to get rid of the pieces they don't like. So the pieces that are being reproduced for this line of Althorp, they're ones that have passed muster generation after generation as ones that people love and want to hang on to. Right,
the favorites all the way through all the generations.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite or two in the current collection or any of the collections that you've put out?
I do. I love some of the ones that have been with us for a dozen years or so during the collection. In particular, there's a beautiful wooden oak chest from about 1600. And I have the original outside my study in Althorp House, and I keep my tennis rackets in it. And the reproduction's fantastic. It's a handsome piece of oak, and it's called the Washington chest because it belonged to George Washington's ancestors. They fell on hard times in the 1600s, and we were cousins of theirs. So the Spencers put them up in a house. It's 1 mile from Althorp. It's still called Washington Cottage. And what I love is the way Theodore Alexander have reproduced it so faithfully that there's a massive, when you open up the top, inside there's a massive scar from who knows when. And then there's also a framed legal document from a priest from the 1800s saying this always belonged to the Washington family. So I love the attention to detail and, again, the richness of the story. You know, the Washingtons, we know from our family records that the little girls from the Washington family, they worked in Althorp House as the nursemaids and nannies to the Spencer children.
Awesome. It's such a beautiful story. I love it. And how about today? So we have interior designers, our colleagues that are out there, and what would you say to them in expressing to them the value of Theodore Alexander as a company and this line that you're doing together with them? What should they know when they think about introducing it into their projects?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Theodore Alexander and Althorp have a partnership which is the enemy of bland. I find so much contemporary design just lacks a spine. And if you go into a room, I want to see some substance. You don't have to be overladen with ornate pieces, but just to have something that actually has some feel to it, that is of permanence and is of history maybe, or of interesting design, but it has to have something beyond the sort of slightly wishy-washy things that we've got used to recently. I love contemporary things too. I collect contemporary art and I add it to the collection at Althorp. But I think that too often there's a sort of what I call a hotel chic design going on, which is people think, oh, if it's bland and a bit messy, it's making a statement. Well, I'm afraid it is. It's making a statement that somebody hasn't got a lot of personality. And what I love about these pieces, in London I have a much more contemporary house, but I throw in a few of these pieces because it makes a room feel like it's been created, not just sort of, it's an oil painting rather than a watercolor.
Interesting. I love it. I have to say, this has been a special treat for me on many, many levels. First of all, I'm a big history buff myself,
Hooray.
And so I relate to you on that level. But I congratulate you on what you're doing here and Theodore Alexander on what they have created with you. And I just value the time you spent with us. Thank you.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for your very intelligent questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.